All right, everybody, we're here for the 12th installment of our basic studies into Italo Calvino's bookshelf, it seems. This is the third of his books that I've read, and by far the largest, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. And it seems as though we're still going to be able to have one more story in which we can refine some elements from this ethereal space. Like silver is just a binding itself around things. Silver lining. And our first story started off as being, more of a story and less of there being things to contemplate until the story sort of unraveled a little bit. Then we kind of see like maybe somebody's trying to break free or define something new, which is kind of an irony. I like to think of things always having some equalization type of point, right? Which is almost better than saying irony, but you're not going to say that every time. Maybe it's only upon some form of equalization. But yeah, so it's like, what is he trying to describe? Something free or define something new, right? When this story is about a young man who's receiving the last words from his father. His father is dying of like yellow fever or something like that. And it's a Spanish story because we've like found ourselves in like South America, like chasing after Marana or whatever, the guy who's been like basically faking all these novels and forging all these things and stuff like that, writing under like tons of pseudonyms and everything. And it's just like, so we followed him, and this guy, our guy here, is trying to get the real story, like he wants to finish something. So he's trying to finish a story, if not maybe like his own to some extent, which is where sort of a lot of his driving force is the fact that there's a woman connected to all these books. I think that in some way he probably feels like if he can finish the story, then maybe he can actually put the binding around his life. Maybe he can feel like it's under control. But see, that's the irony of all this language, is they want it to be free. He wants to write a new chapter maybe, but he doesn't know how to start. And in the very start, that's still a binding. If you kind of think about it like that. But he's run off, because this is the case, to somewhere in South America, some made up places or whatever, you know what I mean? Aguatania or something like that, I think it's called. And then he gets his book taken that he like was the wrong book given to him, but he still read all these stories from all these books. And anyways, like, I'm just like, dude, this is your own thing now, bro. If you think this woman is like going along with this still, then it's just like, dude, like, first off, what kind of woman is this? But I don't know, maybe not my cup of tea. But second off, like, dude, this is like some real, like, I don't know, it's just like some real extracurricular of like nonsense. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even like extracurricular, like on top of what we're like, what is like necessary. It's just like extracurricular, like, dude, like nobody even imagined this. It's like beyond the weeds even, you know what I mean? Like this is like half cooked kind of stuff, you know what I mean? But that's what makes it so fun though, is kind of that idea that this book just sort of doesn't follow the narrative. I feel like that every other book basically follows now. It's honestly, like, you know what, I haven't enjoyed reading a book in a long time, because every time I open up a book and I start reading, it's the exact same book every time. I'm dead serious. Anyways, this one is such a breath of fresh air. maybe it's just about time for me to read a book anyways, which is sort of where I get contemplating free will in this part too. But yeah, so around an empty grave, his father's like telling him all this stuff, and so this guy, he's like, go to this town. The town is Okidal, and like tell them your name and all this stuff. But there's like some super interesting plays going on in this town. First he like shows up there, and then he's like, they're all Indians, by the way, but he's like half, I guess, you know what I mean, like he's half Indian kind of thing. This story gets super interesting, but he's like half Indian or whatever. And then but the weird thing is like everybody's treating him like he's an Indian. That's the thing that almost completely like is misrepresented here. But everybody there is like an Indian. The only people that you come across are like all these Indian women, but he's treated like an Indian, but I guess he's like half. But they also treat him like he's just a white man as well, because then they're always like, you're just like your father. But he's only coming across like Indian women until he comes across an Indian man who I guess is also half Indian, but they were like, he always was like an Indian. It's so weird, this play of like freedom, but also of like there being such an idea of maybe foreign powers that operates off of some dynamic that's just like as primitive as it is almost like thick, just like thick and dense, like maybe some material that you could obviously work with, but only in an age where you have sophistication or something like that. You know what I mean? It presents like some type of image like that. And he like goes and he's like talking to one lady, and because he's trying to find out who his mother is, and he's like, are you my mom and stuff like that, and then she has a daughter and stuff like that, and she won't ever admit that like he's her son or whatever. And then he's like, so he starts like messing around with her daughter, and she's like, don't do that. And he's like, why? Because I'm your son or something like that. And they're like, no, you need to go talk to the mistress of our land or something like that. So he like goes to like the landowners people. The other people he was with was like the peasants. And then he was like, oh, everybody here looks the same. And he's like, you could take the one picture on the wall, and it's like everybody here looks like the same person or whatever. And they're like, that's what is his name? Faust. It's like Faustino or something like that. But he was like, everybody like revered this guy. And it's one of these women's like brother or something like that. And anyways, he's like up there with the higher class people. And he's like, everybody here just looks the same, except for these people are just like dressed different. But he's like, they're the same people, is what he was like. I think it was alluding to that like from this, we're supposed to understand some like relationship between like higher and lower classes, where it's like, it's almost just, he plays off perspective a lot. Obviously he does that in like a ton of his previous work. So it's just like, it's like one of those things of just like seeing the Prince and the Pauper kind of thing, or you know what I mean, or like Aladdin's, you know, basic kind of thing of just like who's the real kind of king or whatever, is the king among us, like a Poor Richard's kind of dichotomy, you know what I mean, sort of thing. And I think he's playing off of that. But then anyways, he like starts getting frisky with like the high class woman's daughter, and then they're like, get out of here, go and tell Anacleta that like you're her daughter or something like that. So he like goes down to there, and then they're like at the grave of where his father fought Faustino Higueras, and they like fought or something with ponchos in one hand and knives in the other, and they jump across this grave they both dug together, continually stabbing each other to see who would push the other one into the grave. And they said that his father, oh yeah, also, see, it's like such a weird play on everything, because it's like he's like Faustino, but then at the same point in time, he's Nacho, which is what the name his father gave him. He didn't know that's what his father's name was. His father, son of Don Anastasio Zamora. But then everybody in the village says, don't you know that your father went by Nacho while he was here? And then all of a sudden this guy Faustino shows up, and they're jumping across this, and then he grabs his poncho and rolls it up, and it's like all of a sudden we just got like transported back in time to this incident where it's just like some metaphor or illusion of himself trying to like have some sort of desert sort of, jewel of the desert type of cat's eye in the cradle, you know what I mean, perspective of this being just so free of everything, but having still a sense of work or something like that, and of progress. And so then this guy shows up who we kind of like figured out was like some guy on the trail that they tried stopping and asking for directions, but he like passed on. But he shows up there, and he's like back ready to fight again, because in the actual story they're like no one ever knows what happened to, because Don Zamora, like Don Anastasio Zamora left, and nobody was ever able to find the body of Faustino. So they're like, he still actually patrols like the mountains of the area, like guarding and protecting the Indians, because he's a true Indian or something like that. And we were also warned by Don, that everybody in the land was going to lie about him too, which I don't know, he didn't really make much note of that at all, but he did mention that to us before we went on this journey trying to find our mother again or whatever. And so then it's just like, you know what, maybe I don't know, it's just like it all just resorted back to violence or something like that. And I don't know, a lot of these novels, he like goes from the thing you got to get from this guy is he's like basically trying to write a composition of almost like every philosopher, it seems to me. I mean, the first is just like Dostoevsky, kind of just like Leo Tolstoy, kind of like, dude, this is like never gonna even start, because it's like so considerate of everything, kind of like atmosphere, right? And it's just like, I don't even remember what I read about all that, you know what I mean? But then it's like we're in this like Spanish like romanticized like and he paints a pretty picture of almost everybody in here. He's got a woman, this guy's got a woman in every in every whatever, but it's like maybe still he kind of like feels that maybe books are his true kind of love or something like that, because then he can express whatever he feels, and it's just that same expression of freedom and sort of maybe the idea of comfort, almost this metaphors of a woman and a man or something like that. But so anyways, our story ends with him fighting basically that Nacho fighting Faustino or whatever over a grave with knives and ponchos again. But the reason our story ends is because we get interrupted and taken back into our main plot, which is the connecting thing between all these books. And this guy has now been taken into custody by the government. This Antigua-Tania government, taking tea with Arcadian Porphyric. I don't know, very interesting names. I love how they flow off the tongue and things like that. But he gets into this philosophy. It's just totally 1984 kind of thing, is what it reminds me of. You know what I mean? It's almost a treatise on government to an extent, where it plays off of perhaps the most notable features of government, or what people remember the most, which is in a lot of cases the worst things, and you know what I mean. But It's like everybody can remember that, but it's sort of like retelling a lot of that in here. There's a lot of books around this time, when this one came out, that were similar, I feel like, in terms of they're painting pictures of governments like this. But he says, the Director General invites you to examine the planisphere hanging on the wall. The varied color scheme indicates the countries where all books are systematically confiscated, the countries where only books published or approved by the state may circulate, the countries where existing censorship is crude, approximate, and unpredictable, the countries where the censorship is subtle, informed, sensitive to implications and illusions. Anyways, this is basically the book version, but I don't know, Fahrenheit 19, whatever, Fahrenheit 451, 1984, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. In 1984, it's more of televisions and screens and stuff like that. This one's books. It's like, okay, we just went from like DC to AC, or you know what I mean, from like digital to analog. It's like the analog version of like 1984 or something like that. It's like if the air could just carry governance itself rather than maybe roots or something, you know what I mean? Like in the clouds, there was some form of structure there. In the constellations, maybe, perhaps. But he gets in here just philosophizing with this guy, and well, this guy is basically just giving himself like a, you know what I mean? Like totally just stroking his own ego, basically. But I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that are said that I feel like I want to make mention of, like, to be sure, repression must allow an occasional breathing space, must close an eye every now and then, alternate indulgence with abuse with a certain unpredictability in its caprices. Otherwise, if nothing more remains to be repressed, the whole system rusts and wears down. Let's be frank, every regime, even the most authoritarian, survives in a situation of unstable equilibrium, whereby it needs to justify constantly the existence of its repressive apparatus, therefore of something to repress. The wish to right things that irk the established authorities is one of the elements necessary to maintain this equilibrium. Therefore, by a secret treaty with the countries whose social regime is opposed to ours, we have created a common organization with which you have intelligently agreed to collaborate, to export the books banned here and import the books banned there. This would seem to imply that the books banned here are allowed there, and vice versa. Not on your life. The books banned here are super banned there, and the books banned there are ultra banned here. But from exporting to the adversary regime one's own banned books, and from importing theirs, each regime derives at least two important advantages. It encourages the opponents of the hostile regime, and it establishes a useful exchange of experience between the police services. And then we get just into, again, it's like, you know what I mean? There are people in the government that are obviously like taking advantage of their position or have more privileges kind of thing than other people. Because then this guy, the Director General, tells you, after he's asked, and do you read? Do I read outside my professional duties, you mean? Yes. I would say that every book, every document, every piece of evidence in this archive I read twice. Two entirely different readings. The first in haste, summarily to know in which file I must keep the microfilm, under what heading it must be cataloged. Then in the evening, I spend my evenings here after the official office hours. The place is calm, relaxing as you see. I stretch out on this sofa. I insert the film of some rare work in the reading machine, some secret dossier, and I enjoy the luxury of savoring it for my exclusive pleasure. So that's reminiscent of like 1984 for sure. You have to admit that the Director General's words give you a feeling of comfort if this man continues to harbor a desire and a curiosity for reading. It means that in the written paper in circulation, there is still something not fabricated or manipulated by the omnipotent bureaucracies, that outside these offices and outside still exists. And what about the Apocrypha conspiracy, you ask, in a voice that tries to be coldly professional? Are you informed about it? And so that's the whole thing about this other thing that's going on, kind of, where there's that guy Marana going around, and there's like these two kind of agencies trying to like control literature again. And And anyways, rather than read everything that I have right here marked again, I'm just going to say, like, he basically says, like, we found this guy and we took him in, arrested him, and basically just, like, tortured him, like, take him to a mental hospital or whatever. And they're like, we couldn't break him. And we could not manage to grasp whether he was joining our game or acting as pawns in his. And what if it were simply a question of madman? Only I could figure out his secret. I had him kidnapped by our agents, brought here, kept for a week in our solitary confinement cells. Then I interrogated him personally. His trouble was not madness, perhaps only desperation. The bet with the woman had long been lost. She was the winner. It was her always curious, always insatiable reading that managed to uncover truths hidden in the most bare-faced fake and falsity, with no attenuating circumstances in words claiming to be the most truthful. What could our illusionists do rather than sever the last thread that tied him to her? He went on sowing confusion among titles, authors, names, pseudonyms, languages, translations, editions, jackets, title pages, chapters, beginnings, ends, so that she would be forced to recognize those signs of his presence, his greeting without hope. Anyways, I allowed him to escape, a fake clandestine expatriation, and his trail was lost again, I believe. I recognize his hand every now and then, immaterial, I happen to see. His qualities improved. Now he practices mystification for mystification's sake. Our power has no more effect on him, luckily. Luckily, something must always remain that eludes us, for power to have an object on which to be exercised, a space in which to stretch out its arms. As long as I know there exists in the world someone who does tricks only for the love of the trick, as long as I know there is a woman who loves reading for reading's sake, I can convince myself that the world continues. And every evening I too abandon myself to reading like that distant unknown woman. Has a sense of humanity there for a moment, this dictator does. But anyways, then he gets this plan to, he reveals to him, he's like, hey, I actually have a book that's not a part of all this. Ironic, like, not a part of all this. Everybody's searching for something they can claim to be their own, even if it's, I want to be able to read something genuine, almost something that no one else has told me before, kind of thing. But then the irony again with that is that you probably want to just tell everyone else about it. You know what I mean? Life is a very confusing spell, let me tell you. And that's why I've written my own spell here in the bottom, because at the same moment I felt like I just wanted to ask myself a question, like, is there such a thing as real popularity? Is popularity not abroad? Is government itself simply the expression of popularity? If the writer's book only has a government because governments are popular, does it make it a premonition for it to have a government? Because if the book failed, would we have ever come to know this author? What makes it feel unnatural, uncanny, that something good would ever rest on chance? What makes the question a question of free will? Either that or of the harsh nature of reality that takes innocence. Just the fact that something good may never really find its way. It's sad. At least that's what it makes me think of. And then we get in here more, and it's like, the book I'm looking for, says the blurred figure who holds out a volume similar to yours, is the one that gives a sense of the world. Oh, this is his dream that he had. He dreamt of Ludmilla in a dream. Before he's going to pick up this... Okay, so they revealed to him this guy that's like writing a book. They're about to go and take it from him. And he's like, oh, I'm going to get it before you guys. Those are his thoughts or whatever. So he's like going to go set up a meeting to get this book from this guy. And... well, anyways, before that happens, he has a dream, and he's on a train, and there's like two buses, and Ludmilla's on the other bus, and he's on this bus, and he saw everybody reading a book, like they were all reading something that was good, or whatever this is we're trying to find, and all of this, and he like grabs on it, and everyone like starts looking at him in his dream, so he like walks over to a window and like holds it out the window, but then he sees that girl on the other side, and she's holding the book out the window too, and he says, the book I'm looking for, says the blurred, he goes, I found it, it's here. And you struggle to lower the window down to pass it to her through the hard fringe of the ice that covers the train in a thick rust. The book I'm looking for, says the blurred figure, who holds out a volume similar to yours, is the one that gives the sense of the world after the end of the world. The sense that the world is the end of everything that there is in the world, that the only thing there is in the world is the end of the world. That's not so, you shout, and you hunt in the incomprehensible book for a sentence that can contradict Ludmilla's words. But the trains depart, moving off in opposite directions. And a train just horned. Doesn't happen around here very much. But anyways, so you go to pick that up from this guy, and he starts to pass you all these pages through this bush. You like set up a meeting in a garden. He's like, careful, they're like watching the garden and all this stuff. And he starts like passing things through a hedge, and then he's like, sorry, I had to put it in all these different pockets because I didn't want it to bulge in any place and all this stuff. And he's like, starts passing it through, and then as he's like passing it through, like a bunch of like private Secret Service guys come and whisk him away, and he gets arrested. And so you're left with this story. What story down there awaits its end? And that's where we're at, and that's what I'm guessing is going to be the final book. I know I've said that now like 3 times, but it's because I haven't tried to look to the end. Anyways, guys, that is our 12th installment of the series. Hope you enjoy. If anything, I hope that I look strong.